My name is Jessica, I'm 28 years old, and I work as a remote graphic designer from my cozy apartment downtown. To most people, that sounds like a dream job. Flexible hours, creative work, no commute. But to my family? Well, they seem to think it means I'm perpetually available for whatever they need. I live in a family where I'm the middle child, sandwiched between my older sister Rachel, who's 32 with twin 8-year-old boys, and my younger sister Maya, who's 25 with a 5-year-old daughter. Both my sisters are married, living in beautiful suburban homes with white picket fences and the whole perfect family aesthetic. Me? I'm single, independent, and apparently, that makes me everyone's go-to solution when they need help. The problem started about 2 years ago, when I transitioned from working in a traditional office to freelancing full-time. Initially, my family was supportive, or so I thought. "That's wonderful, honey," my mom would say. "You'll have so much more flexibility now." What she really meant, as I discovered later, was, "Now you'll be available whenever we need you." Before we dive deeper, I'd love it if you could hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Your support means the world to me, and if my story resonates with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. It began innocuously enough. Rachel would call on Friday afternoons. "Hey Jess, could you watch the twins tomorrow? Mark and I want to see that new movie." Or Maya would text, "Emergency at work. Can you pick up Lily from school?" At first, I didn't mind. I love my nephews and niece, and helping family felt natural. But gradually, these favors became expectations. Weekend plans with friends? Canceled because someone needed a babysitter. Important client deadlines? Pushed back because there was a family emergency that somehow always required my immediate attention. Date nights? Forget about it. Apparently, my love life was less important than everyone else's convenience. The worst part wasn't even the babysitting itself. It was the complete dismissal of my work and schedule. "It's not like you have a real boss," Rachel would say when I mentioned having deadlines. "Can't you just work later?" Maya would add, "You're so lucky you can work in your pajamas all day." They genuinely couldn't understand that freelancing required discipline, client management, and actual business hours. My parents weren't much better. Dad, a traditional man who worked in manufacturing for 30 years, would shake his head whenever I explained my work. In my day, work meant showing up somewhere. He'd grumble. Mom would nod in agreement, adding, "At least you're keeping busy with something." The breaking point had been building for months. Every family gathering involved someone mentioning how lucky I was to have such a flexible schedule. Every holiday included unsolicited advice about finding a real job with benefits. Every conversation somehow circled back to how I could better serve everyone else's needs. What hurt most was how invisible my actual achievements were. Last year, I landed my biggest client, a tech startup that hired me to redesign their entire brand identity. It was a 6-figure contract, the kind of success that should have made my family proud. When I shared the news at Sunday dinner, the conversation lasted exactly 30 seconds before Maya started talking about Lily's soccer schedule. I'd tried explaining my boundaries multiple times. "I need advance notice for babysitting," I'd say. "My work requires uninterrupted time," I'd emphasize. "I have a social life too," I'd remind them. But somehow, these conversations never stuck. A week later, someone would call expecting immediate availability, acting surprised when I wasn't thrilled to drop everything. The loneliness was crushing. While my sisters had built-in support systems through their spouses and parenting communities, I felt increasingly isolated from my own family. They saw me as a service provider rather than a sister, an aunt, a daughter, with her own dreams and challenges. 3 months ago, I made a decision that would change everything. I booked a Christmas vacation with my college friends to a cabin in the mountains. We'd been talking about it for years, a real getaway where we could reconnect, ski, and just be adults without responsibilities. I put down a non-refundable deposit, requested time off from my clients, and started looking forward to my first real vacation in 2 years. I should have known it wouldn't be that simple. The signs were there in early December. Hushed phone conversations between my sisters that stopped when I entered the room. My parents asking oddly specific questions about my holiday plans. Rachel making comments about how quiet Christmas would be this year. I brushed it off, thinking they were planning some surprise or just making conversation. December 23rd arrived, and we gathered for our traditional Christmas Eve dinner at my parents' house. The dining room was decorated with Mom's collection of holiday figurines, the smell of her famous honey ham filling the air. Everything seemed normal as we sat down to eat, until Rachel cleared her throat and made an announcement that would shatter my holiday plans. "So, we have exciting news," she began, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. "All of us adults are taking a Christmas vacation to Mexico. The flights are booked, the resort is paid for, and we leave tomorrow morning." The room erupted in excitement. Maya clapped her hands, Mom squealed with delight, and Dad grinned broadly. Everyone was celebrating the spontaneous family trip. Everyone except me, because clearly I wasn't included in all of us adults. "What about the kids?" I asked, though I had a sinking feeling I already knew the answer. Rachel waved dismissively. "Oh, that's all taken care of. They'll stay with you for the week. We figured you wouldn't mind since you don't have any real plans anyway." The casualness of her assumption hit me like a physical blow. Not only had they planned an entire vacation without including me, but they'd also assigned me the role of unpaid childcare provider without even asking. The room fell silent as everyone waited for my response, their faces showing no doubt that I would, of course, comply with their plan. That's when I said the word that would change everything: no. The single word no hung in the air like a smoke alarm that wouldn't stop beeping. You could have heard a pin drop in that dining room. My family stared at me as if I'd just announced I was moving to Mars. Rachel's fork was halfway to her mouth, frozen in shock. Maya's eyes went wide, and my parents exchanged the kind of look that said, "Did our daughter just malfunction?" "What do you mean, no?" Rachel finally managed, setting down her fork with a clink that seemed to echo through the silence. I took a deep breath, feeling my heart pound against my ribs. "I mean, no, I won't be watching the kids while you all go to Mexico. I have plans of my own." The reaction was immediate and explosive. Rachel's face flushed red. Maya gasped audibly, and Mom's hand flew to her chest as if she was having heart palpitations. Dad just sat there, shaking his head like I disappointed him beyond measure. "Jessica Marie Thompson," Mom said, using my full name like I was still 12 years old. "What has gotten into you? This is your family we're talking about." "Exactly," I replied, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "My family, the same family that planned an entire vacation without including me, then assumed I'd be thrilled to provide free childcare while you all sip margaritas on the beach." Rachel leaned forward, her voice taking on that condescending tone she'd perfected as the oldest child. "Jess, come on. You know we would have invited you, but we figured you'd rather stay home. You're always talking about being too busy with work, and you hate crowded resorts." The gaslighting was so smooth, so practiced, that for a moment I almost believed her. Almost. When did I ever say I hate resorts? And when did you ask me what I'd prefer? "Well, we just assumed," Maya started. "There it is," I interrupted. "You assumed, just like you always assume I'm available. Assume my time doesn't matter. Assume I don't have a life outside of being your backup babysitter." Dad finally spoke up, his voice carrying that authoritative tone that had shut down my teenage arguments. "Jessica, your sisters work hard. They deserve a break. You, of all people, should understand that." "What about my break, Dad? When do I get to relax? When do I get to have plans that matter?" "It's different," he said dismissively. "They have responsibilities. Real responsibilities." There it was, the thing they'd all been thinking, but never said outright. My work wasn't real. My life wasn't real. Only their marriages, their children, their needs were legitimate. Rachel stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "This is ridiculous. We've already paid for everything. The kids are expecting to stay with Aunt Jessica. You can't just decide to be selfish now." "Selfish?" I stood up too, matching her energy. "I'm selfish for wanting to be included in family plans. I'm selfish for not wanting to be treated like hired help." "Nobody treats you like hired help," Maya protested, though her voice lacked conviction. "Really? When's the last time any of you asked about my life without needing something? When's the last time you invited me somewhere that didn't involve babysitting? The silence stretched on because we all knew the answer was never. Mom tried a different approach, her voice softening into the guilt-tripped tone I'd heard my entire life. Honey, we love you. You're such a good aunt and the children adore you. We just thought you'd want to help. I do want to help, I said, my own voice cracking slightly. But I want to be asked, not told. I want my time to be respected. I want to feel like I matter to this family, for more than just what I can do for everyone else. You're being dramatic, Rachel snapped. It's 1 week. 1 week, Jessica. We're not asking you to raise them. But you're asking me to cancel my plans, reschedule my work, and give up my vacation so you can have yours. How is that fair? What vacation? Dad asked skeptically. Where are you going that's so important? I wanted to tell them about the cabin, about my friends who actually valued my company, about how excited I'd been to finally have a real break. But I realized it didn't matter. Even if I told them, they'd find a way to minimize it, to make it seem less important than their trip. It doesn't matter where I'm going, I said instead. What matters is that I made plans, and you all assumed you could override them without even asking. Rachel threw her hands up in frustration. Fine. What will it take? We'll pay you this time. How much do you want for the week? The offer hit me like a slap. After everything I'd said, she still didn't get it. This wasn't about money. It was about respect, about being seen as a person rather than a service. You think this is about money? I asked, incredulous. Isn't it? She shot back. You freelancers are always worried about money, right? Consider it a Christmas bonus. Maya nodded eagerly. Yes, we can pay you what we would have spent on a babysitter. Problem solved. I looked around the table at these people who were supposed to know me better than anyone, my own family, and they genuinely believed that throwing money at me would fix the years of being taken for granted. I don't want your money, I said quietly. I want you to understand that I'm a person with my own life, my own dreams, my own right to say no. Well, this is just great, Rachel said, her voice rising. Our whole vacation is ruined because Jessica decided to have a personality crisis. This isn't a personality crisis. This is me finally standing up for myself. Mom started crying then, the kind of manipulative tears that had guilted me into compliance for 28 years. I can't believe my own daughter would destroy Christmas for the whole family. I'm not destroying Christmas. I'm just not available to babysit. Same thing, Maya muttered. And there it was, the truth they'd all been dancing around. In their minds, my value to the family was entirely tied to my availability as free childcare. Without that, I was useless to them. Dad stood up slowly, his face stern with disappointment. Jessica, I think you need to reconsider your priorities. Family comes first. You're right, I said, gathering my purse and coat. Family should come first. Maybe you should all think about what that means. Where are you going? Mom called out as I headed toward the door. Home, to prepare for my vacation. Jessica Marie, you get back here right now. Dad's voice boomed behind me, but for the first time in my life, I didn't stop. I didn't turn around. I walked straight out of that house and got in my car. My hands were shaking as I started the engine. 28 years of being the accommodating middle child, the helpful aunt, the reliable daughter, and I'd just blown it all up with one word. As I drove away, I could see them through the dining room window, probably already planning how to guilt me into changing my mind. But I wasn't going to change my mind. Not this time. When I got home, I sat in my car in the parking garage for 10 minutes, just breathing. My phone was already buzzing with texts, but I ignored them. Whatever they were saying, I knew it wouldn't be an apology or an acknowledgement that they'd been wrong. It would be more guilt, more manipulation, more reasons why I should sacrifice my happiness for theirs. I finally went upstairs to my apartment and looked at my suitcase, half packed for the mountain cabin trip. Tomorrow morning, I was supposed to meet my friends at 7 a.m. for the drive-up. For the first time in months, I was genuinely excited about something, and I wasn't going to let my family's expectations ruin it. My phone rang. Rachel's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. Then Maya called. Then Mom. Then Dad. I turned the phone off and ran a hot bath, trying to wash away the stress of the evening. As I soaked in the tub, I thought about what had just happened. Part of me felt guilty. That conditioned response from years of being told that my needs came last. But a bigger part of me felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time. Pride. I had stood up for myself. I had said no, and meant it. Whatever happened next, I knew there was no going back. The family dynamic that had defined my entire life had just been shattered, and tomorrow, I would start figuring out who I was without it. The mountain cabin was waiting. My friends were waiting. My real life, the one I'd been putting on hold for everyone else's convenience, was finally about to begin. Christmas morning arrived with a peace I hadn't felt in years. For the first time since I could remember, I woke up without the anxiety of family obligations weighing on my chest. My alarm went off at 6 a.m., and instead of groaning about an early wake-up call, I practically bounced out of bed. Today was the day I was finally putting myself first. My bags were packed and waiting by the door, hiking boots, cozy sweaters, and the new winter jacket I'd bought specifically for this trip. I'd even splurged on some expensive hot chocolate mix and artisanal marshmallows to share with my friends. When was the last time I'd bought something just for the joy of it, without calculating whether I could afford it after helping family with various expenses? My phone had remained off since the night before, but as I made coffee and toast, curiosity got the better of me. I powered it on to a barrage of notifications, 23 missed calls, 47 text messages, and 12 voicemails. My stomach clenched as I scrolled through the preview text snippets. Rachel, this is insane. Call me back now. Maya, the kids are asking where Aunt Jess is. How do I explain this? Mom, please reconsider. We can work something out. Dad, your behavior is unacceptable. Fix this. And then, around 2 a.m., the messages took a different tone. Rachel, fine. If you won't help, we'll figure it out ourselves. Maya, I can't believe you're doing this to the children. Mom, I'm disappointed in the person you've become. I deleted the messages without reading them fully. Whatever guilt trips they were trying to send, I wasn't going to let them poison my day. Instead, I wrote a quick note on a piece of paper, not because I thought they deserved an explanation, but because I wanted to be crystal clear about my boundaries. I told you I wasn't available this week. I'm at a mountain cabin with friends until January 2nd. This is what having a life outside of family obligations looks like. I hope you can find proper childcare and that the children understand that planning ahead is important. Don't contact me again until you're ready to treat me like an equal family member, not an employee. Jessica. I taped it to my apartment door and grabbed my bags. At exactly 7 a.m., I was standing in the lobby of my building when my friend Marcus pulled up in his SUV with Kate and David already buckled in and grinning. There she is, Kate called out from the passenger seat. The woman who finally learned to say no. I'd told them about the Christmas dinner disaster during our group chat the night before, and their support had been overwhelming. These were friends who understood that my work was real, who celebrated my successes, who valued my company for who I was, not what I could do for them. I still can't believe they planned a whole vacation without you, David said as he helped me load my bags. That's beyond rude. Marcus shook his head as we pulled away from my building. I've been telling you for years that your family takes advantage. I'm proud of you for finally setting boundaries. The 2-hour drive to the mountains was like therapy. We talked about everything except my family drama. Work projects, dating stories, travel plans, dreams for the new year. I realized how starved I'd been for conversations that centered around mutual interests, rather than one-sided needs. When we arrived at the cabin, I felt my shoulders relax for the first time in months. It was a beautiful A-frame structure, nestled among pine trees, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a wraparound deck that offered stunning mountain views. This was what I'd been looking forward to, what I'd almost given up for another week of chaos in my tiny apartment. This is incredible, I breathed, stepping out of the car. Wait until you see the inside, Kate said, practically bouncing with excitement. There's a hot tub, a fireplace, and the kitchen is amazing. As we unloaded our belongings, I felt my phone buzzing constantly in my pocket. Finally, I pulled it out and saw that my family was now calling on repeat. The same names cycling through: Rachel, Maya, Mom, Dad, Rachel again. "You should probably turn that off," Marcus suggested gently. "This is your vacation." He was right. I powered down the phone and tossed it into my suitcase. Whatever crisis they were having, they'd created it themselves by assuming I'd always be available to fix their problems. The first day was pure bliss. We hiked a moderate trail that led to a frozen waterfall, the winter air crisp and clean in our lungs. I took more photos that day than I had in the past 6 months combined. When was the last time I'd done something purely for enjoyment without worrying about anyone else's schedule? That evening, we cooked dinner together, a proper feast with steaks, roasted vegetables, and a bottle of wine that Kate had been saving for a special occasion. As we sat around the fireplace afterward, playing board games and sharing stories, I realized this was what family was supposed to feel like. People who enjoyed each other's company, who contributed equally, who respected each other's time and boundaries. "So David said during a break in our Scrabble game, 'What's your plan when you get back? Are you going to talk to them?'" I'd been avoiding that question all day, but I knew it was coming. "Honestly, I don't know. Part of me feels guilty. Those kids didn't ask to be in the middle of this." "The kids aren't in the middle of anything," Kate said firmly. "Your sisters are adults who decided to plan a vacation without arranging proper childcare. That's their responsibility, not yours. But they're probably telling the kids that Aunt Jessica doesn't love them anymore, or something equally manipulative," I said, feeling that familiar knot of anxiety in my stomach. Marcus leaned forward in his chair. "Jess, you've been managing other people's emotions your entire adult life. When do you get to focus on your own?" He was right, and I knew it. But unlearning 28 years of conditioning wasn't going to happen overnight. The second day brought fresh snow and perfect skiing conditions at a nearby resort. I'd always wanted to learn to ski but never had the time or money because I was always covering someone else's emergencies. My friends were patient teachers, and by the end of the day, I was making it down the beginner slopes without falling. "Look at you go." Kate cheered as I managed a particularly tricky turn. I felt proud of myself in a way that had nothing to do with helping others or meeting their expectations. This was just for me, a skill I was learning, a challenge I was conquering, a moment of pure personal achievement. That night, curiosity got the better of me, and I briefly turned on my phone to check the damage. The number of missed communications had grown exponentially. 67 missed calls, 89 text messages, and 18 voicemails. There were also messages from relatives I barely spoke to, aunts, uncles, cousins, all apparently drafted into the guilt campaign. But what caught my attention were the more recent messages from Rachel, sent just an hour ago. "Mom and Dad had to cancel their trip. They're watching the kids instead. I hope you're happy. The children keep asking why you hate them. Nice job traumatizing your nephew and nieces. Don't bother coming to any family events anymore. You're not welcome." I stared at those messages for a long moment. Instead of feeling guilty, I felt relieved. They were showing their true colors, proving that their love was entirely conditional on my compliance. After years of wondering if I was being too sensitive or asking for too much, here was clear evidence that I'd been right all along. I screenshot the messages and showed them to my friends. "Wow," David said after reading them. "They really went full nuclear, didn't they?" "This is actually perfect," Marcus said. "Now you know exactly where you stand. No more wondering if you're overreacting or being unfair." Kate nodded in agreement. "They literally proved your point. They planned a vacation without arranging childcare, expected you to fix their problem, and when you couldn't, they blamed you for everything that went wrong." The third day was New Year's Eve, and the cabin came with a perfect view of the valley below where we could see fireworks from several towns. We'd planned a quiet celebration, good food, good wine, and good company. As midnight approached, I found myself standing on the deck, wrapped in a warm blanket, watching the stars. "Penny, for your thoughts?" Kate joined me outside. "I keep thinking about this time last year," I said. "I was babysitting my nephew and nieces because Rachel and her husband wanted to go to a fancy New Year's party. I spent the evening breaking up fights and cleaning up spilled juice while they were dancing and drinking champagne. And this year? I smiled, listening to the sound of Marcus and David laughing inside over some story. This year, I'm exactly where I want to be. At midnight, as fireworks lit up the winter sky, I made a resolution that had nothing to do with losing weight or learning new skills or any of the usual promises people make. I resolved to never again apologize for having boundaries. I resolved to never again sacrifice my happiness to manage other people's poor planning. I resolved to build a life that was truly mine. When we returned to the cabin after watching the fireworks from the hot tub, I made one final check of my phone. Among the continued barrage of guilt trips and accusations, there was one message that stood out. It was from my cousin Emma, who I'd always been close to but rarely saw because she lived across the country. Jess, I heard about Christmas from Aunt Linda. Good for you. I've watched this family walk all over you for years. You deserve better. Call me when you're ready to talk to family who actually cares about you. I saved that message and deleted everything else. Tomorrow, I would return to my real life. Tomorrow, I would face the consequences of choosing myself for once. But tonight, surrounded by people who valued me for who I was rather than what I could provide, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. The mountain air was crisp and clean. The stars were brilliant against the dark sky, and for the first time in my adult life, I was exactly where I belonged. Returning to reality after 4 days of mountain paradise felt like stepping out of a warm house into a blizzard. As Marcus dropped me off at my apartment building on January 2nd, the weight of what I'd done began to settle on my shoulders. I'd essentially blown up my relationship with my entire immediate family over Christmas. The rational part of my brain knew I'd done the right thing, but the conditioned part of me felt terrified of the consequences. "You've got this," Marcus said as he helped me unload my bags. "And if you need anything at all, just call us. We're your real family now." His words meant more to me than he probably realized. I hugged each of my friends goodbye, already missing the easy camaraderie we'd shared at the cabin. Walking into my apartment felt strange after 4 days away. Everything was exactly as I'd left it, but I felt fundamentally changed. The space seemed quieter, more peaceful, without the constant anxiety of potential family interruptions. My phone, which I'd finally turned back on during the drive home, had mercifully stopped buzzing with new messages. Either my family had given up, or they were planning something bigger. I got my answer the next morning. I was working on a logo design for a new client when my building's concierge called my apartment. "Miss Thompson? There are some people here to see you. They say they're your parents?" My stomach dropped. "Did they ask you to call, or did they demand it?" "They were quite insistent," he said diplomatically, which told me everything I needed to know. "Please tell them I'm not available and ask them to leave." I did mention that you'd left instructions not to be disturbed, but they said it was urgent family business. Of course they did. In their minds, their needs were always urgent, always took precedence over everything else. "Thank you for calling up first, Roberto. Please tell them to leave or I'll have to call security." "Understood, Miss Thompson." But they didn't leave. For the next 3 hours, Roberto called twice more to inform me that my parents were still in the lobby, alternately demanding to see me and asking him to convince me to come downstairs. Finally, around noon, I heard the familiar sound of knocking at my door, not the gentle knock of a neighbor, but the authoritative pounding of someone who felt entitled to my time. I looked through the peephole and saw all 4 of them, Mom, Dad, Rachel, and Maya, standing in my hallway like some kind of intervention squad. They'd somehow convinced or badgered Roberto into letting them upstairs. "Jessica Marie Thompson," Mom's voice carried through the door. "Open this door right now." I stayed silent, hoping they'd eventually give up. But these were people who'd spent decades believing they could wear down my resistance through sheer persistence. "We know you're in there," Rachel called out. "Your car is in the garage, and Roberto said you were home." More pounding. "Jessica, this is ridiculous." Dad's voice boomed. "We're your family. Open the door so we can talk like adults." The irony wasn't lost on me. They wanted to talk like adults while standing in my hallway having a tantrum because I wouldn't immediately comply with their demands. Maya tried a softer approach. Jess, please. The kids are asking about you. Tyler made you a drawing, and the twins wrote you letters. Don't you want to see them? The guilt hit me right in the chest. I did miss the kids. They were innocent in all of this, caught between their parents, poor planning, and my need for boundaries. But I also knew that giving in now would teach them the same toxic patterns that had dominated my own childhood. That love was conditional on compliance, that some people's needs always came before others. I made a decision that felt both terrifying and liberating. I opened my laptop and started typing. An hour later, I'd composed a detailed email explaining everything that had led to this moment. I wrote about years of feeling invisible, about being treated as free labor, about having my work and life dismissed as unimportant. I wrote about the Christmas dinner where they'd assumed I'd sacrifice my vacation for their convenience. I wrote about the manipulative messages and guilt trips that had followed. But I also wrote about my love for them, my hope that we could find a healthier way to be family, and my willingness to rebuild our relationships on terms that respected everyone's autonomy and worth. I sent copies to Rachel, Maya, and both parents, with a note that I'd be happy to discuss it after they'd had time to read and reflect, but that I wouldn't be opening my door to ambush conversations. The pounding stopped about 20 minutes after I sent the email. Either they were reading it, or they'd finally given up for the day. That evening, I got a response from my cousin Emma, who I'd called after my family's lobby siege. She lived in Portland and worked as a therapist, which gave her perspective on family dysfunction that I desperately needed. Jess, she said during our video call, what you described in that email is textbook emotional manipulation and parentification. You've been functioning as their emotional dumping ground and problem solver since you were a teenager. But they're family, I said, voicing the guilt that had been programmed into me since childhood. Isn't family supposed to help each other? Help, yes. But healthy families ask for help, express gratitude, and reciprocate support. They don't assign roles where one person always gives and others always take. She leaned forward on her screen. Tell me, when's the last time any of them helped you with something you needed? I opened my mouth to answer, then closed it. I genuinely couldn't think of a single example. That's not family, Jess. That's exploitation with a family label slapped on it. Her words gave me the validation I needed to stick to my boundaries. Over the next few weeks, I established new patterns that prioritized my well-being. I changed my phone number and gave the new one only to people who respected my time and energy. I set strict work hours and stuck to them. I started saying no to social obligations that didn't bring me joy. The responses to my email trickled in over the course of 2 weeks, and they revealed everything I needed to know about who these people really were. Dad's response was 2 sentences. Your mother is heartbroken by your selfish behavior. When you're ready to apologize and act like a real daughter, let us know. Maya's was longer but equally disappointing. I can't believe you think we don't love you. Everything we've ever asked you to do was because we trusted you and knew you cared about family. The kids are devastated that their aunt decided she doesn't want to be in their lives anymore. I hope whatever point you're trying to make was worth hurting children. Rachel's response surprised me with its anger. Your email is full of lies and exaggerations. Nobody forced you to babysit. You always seemed happy to help, and we would have found other arrangements if you'd ever said you had a problem with it. But I guess playing the victim is easier than taking responsibility for your own choices. Don't contact us again until you're ready to stop this childish behavior. Only Mom's response showed any hint of self-reflection. Jessica, I've read your email several times, and while I don't agree with everything you said, I can see that you feel hurt. I never intended to make you feel unimportant. Maybe we can talk when emotions aren't so high. I miss my daughter. It wasn't the apology I deserved, but it was at least an acknowledgement that my feelings existed. I decided to write back to her, setting clear boundaries for any future relationship, advance notice for any requests, equal participation in family gatherings, respect for my work and schedule, and an end to the assumption that being single made me automatically available. 3 months passed with no response to my boundary-setting email. During that time, I thrived in ways I hadn't expected. Without the constant drain of family drama, I had energy for new projects. I landed 2 major clients, started dating again, and even took a weekend pottery class just because it sounded fun. My friend group rallied around me in ways my family never had. When I got food poisoning, Kate brought me soup and stayed to make sure I was okay. When I celebrated landing my biggest contract ever, Marcus and David threw me a surprise party. These people showed up for me without being asked, without expecting anything in return, simply because they cared. The breakthrough came in late March on my 29th birthday. I was having dinner with my chosen family at my favorite restaurant when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was Rachel. "Jess, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I've been thinking about your email a lot. I talked to my therapist about it, and she helped me see some things differently. I'm not ready to admit I was completely wrong, but I can see that we haven't been fair to you. Would you be willing to talk? Not about babysitting or favors or anything like that, just talk." I stared at the message for a long moment. Kate, who was sitting beside me, glanced at my phone and raised her eyebrows. "Good news or bad news?" "I honestly don't know," I said. After much consideration and a long conversation with Emma, I decided to meet Rachel for coffee, on neutral ground, with a clear time limit, and with predetermined boundaries about what we would and wouldn't discuss. The conversation was awkward and stilted at first. Rachel looked older, tired in a way I'd never seen before. She kept apologizing for things that weren't really apologies. "I'm sorry you felt excluded," instead of, "I'm sorry I excluded you." But gradually, something shifted. She started talking about her own struggles with motherhood, her marriage, her feeling of being overwhelmed by responsibilities. For the first time in our adult lives, she was talking to me like a person rather than a resource. "I think I resented you," she admitted near the end of our 2-hour conversation. "You seemed so free, so able to make your own choices. I guess I wanted some of that freedom, even if it meant putting my responsibilities on you." It wasn't a complete apology, but it was honest in a way Rachel had never been with me before. "I miss you," she said as we prepared to leave. "Not as a babysitter or problem solver. I miss my sister." "I miss you too," I said, and meant it. "But I need to know that you see me as a whole person with my own life and needs." "I'm trying to learn how to do that," she said. We didn't hug goodbye. Too much hurt still existed between us for that. But we agreed to try meeting again in a few weeks, to see if we could build something new from the ashes of our old dynamic. The relationship with my parents remained strained, with only occasional stilted text exchanges. Maya continued to give me the silent treatment, apparently unable to move past her belief that I'd abandoned the children. But I was okay with that. I'd learned that love without respect isn't really love at all. I'd learned that family is about choice as much as blood, and that sometimes the family you choose treats you better than the one you were born into. 6 months after that catastrophic Christmas dinner, I was living a life that truly belonged to me. I worked when I wanted to work, traveled when I wanted to travel, and said no without guilt when I didn't want to do something. Most importantly, I'd learned that my worth wasn't measured by my usefulness to others. I was valuable simply for existing, simply for being Jessica, not Jessica the babysitter, or Jessica the problem solver, or Jessica the reliable one, but just Jessica. And for the first time in my adult life, that was enough. As I write this story, it's been almost a year since I walked out of that Christmas dinner. Rachel and I meet for coffee once a month now, carefully rebuilding our relationship on more equal terms. The kids and I exchange letters and video calls, maintaining our connection without me being their default caretaker. My parents and Maya remain largely absent from my life, which is their choice to make. I won't lie and say it doesn't hurt sometimes. There are moments when I miss the illusion of closeness we once shared, even though it was built on my willingness to disappear myself for their convenience. But I've learned that loneliness is temporary, while self-respect lasts forever. I've learned that saying no to things that hurt you makes room for things that heal you. And I've learned that the people who truly love you will find a way to show it without asking you to sacrifice your dignity in return. If you're watching this and seeing yourself in my story, I want you to know that you deserve better. You deserve to be loved for who you are, not what you can provide. You deserve to have boundaries, to say no, to put yourself first sometimes. It might cost you some relationships, but I promise you this: the relationships you lose weren't worth keeping, and the space they leave behind will be filled with something much better: respect, genuine love, and most importantly, peace with yourself. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it helps someone else find the courage to say that simple, powerful word, no.